In 2018, I had the pleasure of listening to Diane Bryant speak at a women's leadership luncheon. I was invited to that luncheon actually by a parent of a student in my class. And that luncheon, to be honest, changed my path in life. Hearing Diane speak, she was the former COO of Google Cloud, if you're not familiar. And when she was talking at that luncheon, she said something that rang true for me. She talked about how women often wait a little bit too long before they take any sort of leap. And she said that she figured this out when she was trying to interview people for positions in Google Cloud. And that often when she would see resumes, it was clear that women were waiting. And what were they waiting for? And why were they waiting? And I sat there listening to her talking, and she went on to talk about other things, but that continued to ring true for me. And I wondered, in that moment, was she talking to me? I had been teaching at the time for about 16 years, and was I waiting? Was I waiting to take leaps? Was I doing what I was supposed to be doing? And was I modeling risk-taking for my students? And if I was going to be really honest with myself, the answer was no. After that talk, I started to think. Here I am, the chair of the LEAD pathway, where I ask my students on a daily basis to leap. It's a pathway that is an intercurricular pathway, meaning it combines multi-subjects. So we have English, science, and history, and I am honored to chair that pathway. Every day we ask students to synthesize information, to put things together, to stand up in front of people that they don't know, experts in fields, and to give presentations on all different topics. They are risk-taking every day. But if I was going to be honest with myself, was I doing the same thing? And I realized that I continued to talk myself out of these opportunities. The way that Diane put it, we had that inner voice, and that inner voice was saying to us, are you really ready for this? Could you do it? And I kept answering no, and it was stopping me in my life. So I decided in that moment that what I wanted to do over the next year and a half was actually model the leaps that I expect of my students, of myself, of my family. In order to do this, I needed to get some permission to model those leaps. So I came home and I asked my family, my husband, my children, if I could take the next year, and I entitled it the Year of Yes to Me. I said, can I do this? Can I take some time and focus on all the things that I have always wanted to do, but maybe was too scared? And I got a resounding yes, that they would support me in doing that. What I wanted to figure out was actually how. So it's not like I didn't understand that leaping was hard, but how do you actually do it? So what I want to share with you today are the 4 things that I have realized I needed to do in order to leap. The first was I had to figure out my why. So I really needed to know my why. And I had listened to many talks. It's the start of many of the things that we do in the LEAP pathway. If you've ever heard Simon Sinek talk, you have to know who you are in order to then share a message. So for me, I know that at the heart of it, I am an educator. I am someone that wants to help others get better. But if I haven't focused on me getting better, how do I help others get better? And I realized in that moment that if that is truly my why, then I need to model it every single day. The next piece, I started reading this book, and it was actually because part of my job as a TOSA is helping with professional development. So it's by Jared Borman, and it's called Professionally Driven. It focuses a lot on how to actually deliver professional development with the staff. But there was one page in that book that I continued to go back to over and over again. And basically what he talked about was how we have a full plate all the time. And if you ever want to do something new, or you want to ask people to do something new, you have to figure out how to clear your plate. You need to figure out how to make and carve out places in your life where you could make room. So what I needed to figure out was, what am I willing to take off my plate in order to do something new? And that for me was really hard. I'm that yes person. I want to do it right. I don't want to disappoint anybody. I don't want to let people down. So how am I going to clear my plate without it looking like a failure? And then I started to have that inner voice again. So for me, clearing my plate meant letting go of teaching yearbook that I had taught for 15 years. And I absolutely loved it. But before I could do that, I kept saying, what will students say? What will staff say? Will they think that I was defeated? Will they think it means that I've given up on something? Was I a failure? And the truth was, I had just outgrown that. I had learned all that I could from it, and it was time for me to make room for something else. It doesn't mean it's bad. I'm championing them on, I'm cheering them on, but I needed to make room for something else, and that is okay. What I needed was to give myself the permission to know that I could let something go, and it didn't mean that what I was doing was bad. So, I knew my why. I had cleared my plate somewhat. I still had lots, but I cleared my plate, and now I needed to leap. So my leap that I wanted to do, and that I did do, was a pretty big one for me. I've taken many leaps this year, but I want to talk to you about one specifically that I learned a great deal from. So my biggest leap over this year was applying for Google Innovator, Google for Education Innovator. And essentially what the Google Innovator program is about within education is it's about people wanting to change the face of education for the entire world. Not a small task. So in order to become a Google for Education Innovator, there are a few steps, and I just want to take you through what I had to do before I even applied, and then once I found out, I got in. So in order to become a Google for Education Innovator, there are a few steps that I've listed up here. I had to pass some certifications, level 1 and level 2, and then I went ahead and went for the trainer level certification that I did. It kind of gave me the confidence or boost to be able to apply for Innovator. And in order to apply for trainer or innovator, you have to put together an application. For innovator, you have to have a giant question that's a design-based thinking question called a how might we question. And this question is supposed to lead you in a year-long journey about something that would change the face of education. So for me, even putting forth the application was a risk. I was going to put myself out there, and it might mean that I get rejected. But lo and behold, I put in my application, and I found out in the summer that I was accepted as one innovator. And just so that you're aware, it was a pretty big deal for me, and it really has changed my trajectory. I have said that and said that often. So for the Innovator program, they take 36 people from the entire world at a time, and they run approximately 4 summits a year in English. So my summit happened in Singapore. And when I applied for the Singapore cohort, I specifically applied for that one because I wanted to, if I was going to leap, I wanted it to be a big leap. I wanted to not only be learning from my how might we question, but I wanted to leave the United States and do something big. And I hadn't traveled that much in my life. I wanted to learn from other people's experiences. So when I was there in my cohort of 36, I was one of 4 from the United States. And what that let me do was learn from everyone around me. I came to realize that education is education no matter where you are, whether you're in a remote village or you're here in Los Gatos, and it taught me a great deal. But there were 2 parts of the Innovator Academy that stuck with me that I really want to share with you because I think they align really well with this idea of taking leaps and risk-taking. So on the very first day of the Innovator Academy, this was a picture that I took there, on the very first day we had a talk, and the talk was about the imposter syndrome. And the idea of the imposter syndrome is that everyone feels like an imposter all the time. And as I was sitting there in my cohort of 36, there were people in that cohort who had written books, given talks on very large stages. There were people who had hundreds of thousands of followers on their education YouTube channels. These people were big people in my mind, people that I had fanned out on Twitter, and now I was sitting next to them in a room. And there I was, thinking I was the only person thinking, why did they take me? Do they know who they took? And then I realized in that moment that I was not alone. Every single person was nodding along as they were talking about imposter syndrome. And every person in that room at some point felt like an imposter. And basically what they told us was to let that go. That if you were accepted into this cohort, you were accepted for being you, and you should be proud of it. If you're a classroom teacher, if you're an administrator, if you're someone else in the tech world, we wanted you because you have a lens that is your own. And in that moment, I started to realize that I needed to own who I was and be proud of it. And that I had to stop questioning. Going back to Diane Bryant's talk, I had to stop that inner voice that continued to be in my head and was still there, even though I had taken the leap, Even though I understood my why, even though I was there in that room, I still had it, and everyone had it, because it was something new and something scary. So I had to let that go. The second piece that really stuck home with me was this idea of 10x moonshot thinking. And so here we were at Google in Singapore, and we had to give a talk at the very end on the Google stage. So before we were to give our talk, they talked to us about this idea of moonshot thinking, which comes from the idea of the Google X division. If you're not familiar, the Google X division, if anybody out there works for them, yay, Google X. Okay, but the Google X division really is a division that prizes innovation. And so the idea, what is beautiful about this division at Google, is that you are actually given a bonus for failure. And that for me was something astounding. What? You're given a bonus for failing? But the idea is, if you are not leaping beyond your current state, if you're not dreaming bigger than the place where you currently are, then you will never experience failure. And that failure is something that we need to experience because it will teach us something. So they continued to say, dream, your ideas for changing education need to be big. Stop thinking about them in a small way and think about them in a 10x way, a moonshot way. The idea that if we were not thinking in a 10x moonshot way, we would never have made it to the moon. People must have turned to them and said, you are crazy to want to leave this planet. And yet, we have to dream bigger, or these big things will never be able to be accomplished. So that has continued to sit with me. But I realized in that moment that 10x thinking, I could do it for a project, but I needed to start to do it for my life. And that's really what I needed to be able to bring back when it comes to taking leaps, that I needed to live in a 10x way. That was something very new for me and profound. This was my group of 6, my cohort that was there. So we were broken into 6 groups of 6 with a coach. So there's a 7th person in there, Stephen, who was my coach. And that group really was a support system throughout this entire journey. We were there for 3 solid days and then 1 extra day for an Energizer summit where other innovators that were in the region would come and you would get to meet them and find out what projects they were working on. It was extremely inspiring. So for me, that leap has been the biggest leap I have ever embarked upon, and it's brought me to new leaps throughout. But I realized that there were some reasons why that leap was possible. And really, that's the next step. You have to have a cheering section when you go to take leaps. In the educational world, that's called a PLN. There are lots of acronyms that we like to use in education. And a PLN stands for a professional learning network. So that PLN has to exist in your personal and professional life. For me, this is my PLN. This is my family. And I have 2 of my 3 children sitting here in the front row. And so for me, I would not have been able to do this without them. The truth is that my husband, as I had mentioned, has been 70% of our family this year to let me do this year of yes, to let me travel more often than I have ever traveled, to speak, which is a huge leap for me to actually get up on a stage and say something, and to have something meaningful to say. I had to realize that I do have something meaningful to say. And that for me means that I should be speaking up and speaking up more often. So with their support, I've been able to do that. For me, it is impossible to do it without people in your corner. So I not only needed that in my personal life, but I needed it in my professional one as well. And I've had to make a PLN for myself. The people that are in this group of pictures, they are a group of Google innovators from all different cohorts. So not just mine, there's only 1 in there that was from mine. I loved every one of my 36 people, but there have been people that I've now found in the 2019 group of Google innovators that have really become my champions. And so as I embark on new projects and I'm taking things on, even doing this speech right before, they're all sending me messages. Go, you can do it. Enjoy TEDx. We can't wait to see the recording. They're all in different countries, all in different time zones, and they're all championing me. So what I continue to realize is you need that cheering section. The last piece that really made me realize I need to give this kind of a talk was when at the end of my academy, I was interviewed. This is Naomi Toland, and she is another Google Innovator. She's interviewed many stellar people in the field of education. She's an innovator herself, but she also does a podcast. And so she's interviewed people all over the world that are quite famous in the education world. And she asked if she could interview me at the end of the academy, and that we would create a podcast of innovators that were there in Singapore. So I was honored that she would want to interview me. And it wasn't until the end of that interview that I came to realize why I needed to give this talk today. So at the very end, you can imagine she's asked me all these questions about what I do in my classroom, who I am, all of these pieces about why I'm there in Singapore. And it wasn't until she stopped recording that she said something that really hit me. And she said to me, "I can't believe that you were able to come to Singapore." I said, "What do you mean, Naomi?" "Well, you have a full-time job and you have 3 kids. And here you are in Singapore taking a week and doing this big experience here in Singapore." And she was in a different place in her life and had said she had thought she wouldn't be able to have children while pursuing these big dreams and goals. And it was after that that I thought, I need to do a talk about that. Like, if having 3 children and working full-time means I don't get to have any sort of dreams anymore, then something is wrong with our system. So I need to be able to dream and showcase that. And if anything, I have to model it. I need to model it for my 3 kids. I need to model it for my students. If I can't expect it of myself, if I can't leap, then I cannot expect it of them. So that is my hope for you, that you will feel free to take leaps and you will try them often. And that in order to do so, you'll know your why, you'll clear your plate, you'll actually take the leaps, and you'll have people cheering you on the entire time. Thank you very much.